Hey guys, in this video we're going to explore one of the most powerful communication tools that I've discovered in the last few years. To do that, we're going to trek deep into the wilderness of the human brain, to a place where it is impossible to tell the difference between a simple disagreement
Won't take long.
and a threat to our very survival. And by the end, I hope to have convinced you of just one thing. The next time you find yourself engaging in an argument, the very first thing that you should reach for is this. Don't worry, I'll explain. In case you're new here, my name's Hayden Richards. I'm an emergency physician, and this is Comms Lab. On this channel, I share what I've learned about having difficult conversations. In 2001, an Australian called David Rock published this article. Rock drew from research across the domains of neuroscience, psychology, and sociology to create what he called the SCARF model. In a moment, we'll take a close look at why he called it that. But before we do, first, we need to understand the scientific theory that underpins the model. There are four basic premises. One, our brains are wired to maximize reward and minimize threat. A table full of delicious food, we move toward. A table full of saber-toothed tiger, we move away from. Two, when the brain responds to social threats, the same neural circuits are activated as when the brain responds to physical threats. In other words, the brain treats social threats and physical threats in the same way, through massive activation of the limbic and sympathetic nervous systems. Three, when our threat response is activated, our ability to solve problems and collaborate with others is markedly reduced. We lose access to our prefrontal cortex. We become primed to either fight or take flight, but very little in between. Four, the threat response is more intense and more easily triggered than the reward response. So what's all that got to do with this? Well, SCARF is an acronym that denotes the 5 social domains in the threat-reward response that can be activated. S is for status. Our status threat response is triggered when we sense that we're being disrespected, devalued, or humiliated. C is for certainty. Our certainty threat response is triggered when we lose confidence about the future, when things just don't seem as predictable as what we thought they were. A is for autonomy. Our autonomy threat response is triggered when we sense a loss of control over ourselves or our situation or any other thing that's important to us. R is for relatedness. Our relatedness threat response is triggered when we sense we've been betrayed or left out or not part of the tribe or discriminated against. F is for fairness. Our fairness threat response is triggered when we sense that something is, unfair. Okay, so we've covered the basics of the model, but how is it useful? In my mind, this model is massively useful in 2 key ways. Firstly, it can help us with self-regulation. Often the most challenging aspect of any conflict, of any difficult interaction, is the degree to which our own threat response is activated. As we've already noted, at a brain level, the limbic system can hijack the brain's resources, and we can lose contact or access to our prefrontal cortex, the thinking, reasoning part of the brain. We might experience this as an initial sense of discombobulation or surprise or shock at the way someone is communicating with us, and then experience a rapid descent into emotional dysregulation and entanglement. So, in my opinion, our first priority when confronted with unexpected incivility in another person should be to preserve or restore just even a little bit of distance or emotional detachment before we lose all contact with our reasonable thinking selves. I've found that if I can just stop, if I can just avoid saying anything for a few seconds, and then ask myself, which threat response has been triggered in me? Maybe my sense of status is threatened by the fact that this is taking place in front of a lot of people. Just this question is enough to preserve a little bit of self-awareness and detach ever so slightly from the interaction. It might just be enough to enable us to think before we act. Hey, I'm feeling a little confused by this interaction. Would it be okay if we continue this conversation in private after we've stabilized the patient? The second important application of this incredible model is in the de-escalation of the other person. Now, if you've been successful in regulating your own emotions, you'll be in a position where you'll be able to think, hopefully, at least a little bit clearly about how to de-escalate the other person's emotion. So how will you use that thinking power? Why not do your best to think about which of the scarf domains has been triggered in the other person, and do your best to verbalize that understanding in some kind of empathetic statement.
Seems like this whole process has been really frustrating because you feel like your opinion hasn't been heard or respected.
In this example, I've tried to name their emotion and then connect it to the underlying threat that I suspect they might be experiencing. In this case, a threat to their status. Don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. Sometimes it's enough that someone has even tried to understand them. Sometimes they'll actually correct you, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's actually a sign that they are starting to gain some awareness over the situation and themselves, and that they're able to engage at a more cognitive level.
To be honest, I mean, it's more about the fact that when you guys make decisions like this, I don't have any control over the outcome. I'm guessing that sense of not being able to control things must be really annoying.
Or any of the other scarf elements.
I'm wondering if this loss of certainty about the future has been really destabilizing for you. You probably feel like you've been betrayed in some way. I'm guessing the way you were treated must have seemed really unfair to you. Yeah, that's right.
When you do get it right, the reward is what I believe to be the most valuable commodity on earth: trust. And when you have their trust, the fight is over. The interaction no longer represents a battle between two fired up amygdalas, but rather a constructive conversation between two prefrontal cortices. Of course, one thing I will say about conflict is that even when you've done the hard work of winning another person's trust, we still need to find a way to assert ourselves that doesn't re-trigger that threat response. We don't want them to go back into that fight or flight mode, but we also don't want to be a doormat. If you're interested in discovering a way to assert yourself in a conflict without triggering defensiveness in the other person, then you should watch this video next. As always, I love hearing from you guys. Please leave your thoughts and comments in the section below. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.